Well, this is a kind of survey of the historical development of the field of literary criticism, right from the Greek period. So that is essential for your understanding of this particular field. So we have named it as the background survey and basics of literary critical approaches. We talk about different approaches. We need to be familiar with their origin, how the field of literary criticism developed throughout this historical period, we can say, right from the ancient Greek period. So we shall talk about this development in this lecture. As I mentioned earlier, it has its roots in ancient Greek criticism. Literary criticism has its roots in ancient Greek criticism, especially in the Greek philosopher Plato's works. And we come across many works by Plato in which he talks about literature and the related things. Of course, he does not directly talk about literature. He expresses his ideas in his books like Ion, Crito, and the Republic. So these are some of the works by Plato, the Greek philosopher. And in these works, he expressed his ideas that laid the foundation for many of the important issues related to literature and philosophy. Okay, and this include means he talked about concepts of truth, beauty, and goodness. He expressed his ideas on these particular issues, and these issues, uh, gave what we call ideas for the field of philosophy and literature. Plato talked about concepts of truth, beauty, and goodness. He also talked about the nature of reality, the structure of society, then the nature and relation of existence, being, our being, he talked about. Further, he talked about the questions about how we know what we know, which is called epistemology, and the nature and relation of being is called ontology. Means it is the study of human existence. And further, he expressed his views on or his ideas on ethics and morality. So these are some of the issues that Plato talked about in his books, in his works. They were not works or books as such, but some of the works related to Plato, Ion, Crito, and the Republic. And I'm sure that you are familiar with Plato's work, The Republic. So he talked about all these things, and these ideas of Plato, laid a kind of foundation for literature and philosophy. And literary criticism has its origin in these ideas. Okay, and Plato's doctrines of ideas, which are also known as essences or forms, are very important. These doctrines of ideas or essences or forms are important in understanding certain things which are related to literature and literary criticism. According to this doctrine of ideas, ultimate reality in human life is spiritual, which he calls the one. Okay, the one. There is only one thing that is spiritual. And Plato uses, actually, this is translation, English translation. He has originally written in the Greek language. So, this one, this ultimate reality, which is spiritual, is composed of ideal forms that exist beyond this world. Okay, it is transcendental, we can say. Means Plato talks about very ideal things. He talks about the things which exist beyond this world. And these ideal forms are beyond common human understanding. Plato thought that our physical world is composed of the shadows, replicas, or imitations of these ideal forms. Okay, those who have studied some classical criticism in your TYBA, you must have understood this idea of imitation or mimesis. What Plato thinks is that whatever we come across in this world, let's say a flower is an imitation, a replica, or a shadow of the original idea. Means the original idea is beyond our world. It is in God's mind. And the flower in the nature is the imitation of that idea, that ideal form. Means God had an ideal form already in his mind, and the flower that which we see with eyes is an imitation of that ideal form. And when the artist, painter or draws a picture of a flower, so that is an imitation of imitation, because the original flower which we think is itself an imitation, a replica, a shadow. And when the painter or an artist talks about this flower, draw the picture of a flower, that is an imitation of imitation. Let's say another example. Let's take another example. The idea of a chair. Now we see a chair. The idea of chair came into being before it came into its physical form. The existence of a physical chair. Before this existence of a physical chair, the idea of chair came into being. And this idea is not does not come from this world. It comes from the spiritual. Okay, it comes from the world beyond our world, which is beyond common understanding. So Plato discovered techniques, found techniques for discovering truth, and these techniques are called logic and reasoning. So you must be knowing that whatever logical thinking that we follow today has its origin in Plato, in Aristotle's ideas, we can say. And before that, Plato's teacher, you might be knowing Socrates, is believed to have taught us logical thinking. I don't know exactly if you have studied a lesson, but when I was in 12th standard, I had studied a lesson wherein we come to know that it was Socrates, the Greek philosopher and Plato's teacher, who taught us thinking, taught the world how to think logically, how to use your own reasoning. Logic means, might be knowing Tarka Shastra, and reasoning is, what we call this Karan Mimamsha. We understand why is it like this. So that is what reasoning. We use our logical knowledge to understand certain things. We try to find the reason behind something. So that is what reasoning is. Now, Plato's ideas has influence, on different spheres of life. So this has an influence, on the literature, philosophy, etc. It was Plato who initiated the still existing debates on the value, nature, and the worth of literature, and of those who produce works of literature. Still today, even today, after several what you call centuries, we talk about Plato's ideas, means his deliberations, his debates on the value, nature, the worth of literature, and about the poets, about the writers, those who produce works of literature, are still, you know, used to understand literature and literary criticism. Some of the catchphrases, catchphrases means important phrases in Plato's thinking are mentioned here. The first is that poetry is the imitation of the imitation. Any art, including poetry, is the imitation of the imitation. Okay, for example, when a poet writes a poem on a beautiful flower, I mentioned earlier that the flower in the nature is the shadow, the replica, or the imitation of the original idea. Okay, that itself is an imitation. And poetry, when a poet talks about that flower, that is the imitation of the imitation. Therefore, Plato was of the firm opinion that poetry is twice distanced from the ultimate reality. It is twice removed from the ultimate reality. So, this is how Plato understands literature. However, his disciple, Plato taught Aristotle. So, Plato's disciple or student, Aristotle, did not agree with Plato. Aristotle is well known for his work, Poetics. In this particular work, Poetics, Aristotle states the general principles of tragedy of his period as he saw them at the time when he lived in Greece, sorry. And he talks about, the general principles of tragedy in accordance with his principles of philosophy. He tried to understand the principles of tragedy in line with his principles of philosophy. Now, what are the main concepts that he talks about? Aristotle talks about mimesis. Mimesis, according to both, no, is no literature is a kind of mimesis, an imitation. But Plato looked at it negatively. He thought that, Plato thought that art is merely an imitation. But for Aristotle, this mimesis is the Greek term for imitation. Mimesis gathers all the arts under the roof of imitation. So the basic thing about all kind of arts, maybe painting, sculpture, literature, all these arts come under one roof because of their one quality. All arts are imitations. So this mimesis is very important. You must be familiar with the word mime. No, mime is a kind of performance without using words. It is all about body language, acting. So mime is a kind of imitation. So mimesis, the word mime comes from this particular Greek word itself. So all arts are kind of imitation, and he agrees with Plato that art is an imitation. However, Plato sees the art of poetry as potential threat against the order in society. For Plato, art was a kind of danger. He thought that art is harmful to human society, especially poetry. Therefore, he thought that poets should not be allowed to live in human society. They should be discarded. They should be thrown away from the society. Plato was very negative about poetry and poets because he looked at poetry as a potential threat. Plato was a very idealist, ideal thinker, we can say. He wanted to have, the ideal kingdom wherein there should not be any kind of evil thing. But for Aristotle, poetry is not a trait. Poetry is something helpful in the improvement of society. These are opposite ideas. A teacher said, Plato was his teacher, he said, poetry is a threat against the order in the society. And for Aristotle, it was helpful in the improvement of society. So this is how they differed in their way of thinking, in their perception of poetry. Now let's have comparison. Let's continue with this comparison. Now we saw that Aristotle disagrees with Plato's opinion about poetry. Now, what makes him to disagree with his teacher? This disagreement means Aristotle's disagreement has its roots in different approaches of these two philosophers. Means the way they look at the idea of imitation is different. Their approach is different. Now, whereas Plato thinks that poetry is an imitation, poetry is two steps removed from the truth or realm of the ideal. Aristotle thinks that poetry is more universal, more general than things as they are, because it is not the function of the poet to relate what happened. It is not up to the poet to tell what happened, or he need not to tell what may happen. It is not the function of the poet to tell. What is possible according to law of probability and necessity. Okay, he just talks what is possible according to the law of probability and or necessity. He does not talk what happened or what may happen. It is not his duty. Okay, he thinks in terms of what is probable. He applied this law of probability or necessity. We are going to understand Aristotle in our regular chapters, unit number 1. But still, this is important to understand here, to understand Plato and Aristotle together. Further, to explain his point, he compares poetry with history. Aristotle comes to the conclusion that poetry is more philosophical and it is higher form of art. It is superior to any other form of art because it is more philosophical. It is superior to painting, superior to sculpture, etc., because it is more philosophical. And even in comparison to history, it is more philosophical. He thinks like that because historian writes of what has already happened, while the poet writes of what could and should happen. Okay, according to the law of probability or necessity. Historian talks about what has already happened, but the poet writes of what could and should happen. And he explains it as the tendency of poetry to express the universal by paying respect to the universal truth, whereas history tends to express the particular. It talks about the history of a particular place. For example, history of Germany, history of India, history of Pakistan. So this is how that is not universal. Whereas what poetry talks is universal, means what lessons. For example, the conflict between good and bad is the universal theme. Okay, love, the feeling of friendship, All these are the universal things that the poetry talks about. Whereas history talks about the history of particular place, particular people. It talks about what happened in a particular place. So, according to Aristotle, poets do not imitate the physical world as it is. Plato thought that they simply imitate the physical world. Aristotle agrees that poetry imitates, or poets do imitate, but they simply do not imitate the physical world. Means they create an imitation of it as it should be, and this paves the way that gets to the ideal as near as possible. The poet tries to talk about how it should be. Therefore, the poet's approach is ideal. The poet is not someone who spoils people, who is a threat to the society. A poet is ideal in a way because he creates an imitation of the world, the physical world, as it should be. Asa asaila hava. That's what he talks about. Okay, therefore, Aristotle is in favor of poets and poetry. He explains it in the context of the difference between comedy and tragedy. So imagine knowing a comedy is a play or a story which ends happily with a happy note. When we understand the term comedy in its general sense, a comedy imitates the actions of the ones who are inferior to the audience. This is the perception of Greek society. In those days, a comedy talked about common people who are inferior in their position, in their status. A comedy does not reflect those people's vices, bad qualities. Vices means bad qualities, but merely what is ridiculous in their behavior. A comedy reflects, talks about the disgusting, the ridiculous part in their behavior, and it is caused by some error or ugliness, which is painless, and it has no harmful effects on the society. So this is how he depends comedy. Then he talks about a tragedy. A tragedy is a story which ends unhappily. Greek people liked tragedy more than comedy. I have already made it clear that you should not take comedy as something only humorous. Comedy is something beyond that. Comedy is a story which ends happily, and tragedy is a story which ends unhappily. Somebody dies, something bad happens. So, a tragedy, uh, he has talked about tragedy in detail in his poetics, and you are familiar with the definition of tragedy. A tragedy is an imitation of a noble and complete action having the proper magnitude. This is the first part. Further, a tragedy employs a language that has been artistically enhanced by each of the kinds of linguistic adornment. Beautiful language applied separately in the various parts of the play. We are going to talk about all these things in unit number 1. Just here, the brief introduction is given. And the tragedy is presented in dramatic, not narrative form. And it achieves through the representation of pitiable and fearful incidents. That is the catharsis. So this is how he defines tragedy. It is an imitation of a noble and complete action in a language of which is dignified, and to achieve pity or to create pity and fear, pity and terror. That is through catharsis. Catharsis is the medical term, which means purification of your human body. So the another term is purgation. Well, uh, here I will not talk about all these things in detail, because we are going to talk about it in our first unit. Okay, Miss Plato, in short, favored what we call poetry. He defended poetry, and he thought that tragedy is an organic whole because it has beginning, middle, and end, and all its parts are interrelated, and it follows the three unities of time, place, and action. It brings a kind of wholeness. Then a tragic hero is a noble man of a positive character, but he has some or other fault, just like Hamlet. Hamlet is a hero, a noble man. He is the prince, but he has a tragic flaw. He has a fault. It's called tragic fault, hamartia, a tragic flaw. The technical term that or Aristotle uses is hamartia, means his misfortune and ultimate downfall. Hamlet, for example, are caused by some error of or frailty in his own character. Hamlet lacks decision-making ability. No, what is his fault? He's a confused character. He's always in dilemma. Dilemma means a confused state of mind. Othello, for example, Othello is a suspicious person. He suspects his wife's character. So this is a tragic flaw in their behavior, and that brings misfortune in their lives. And catharsis is the aimed emotional effect of a tragedy on its audience. After watching that, whatever effect the audience experience, that is catharsis. Just now I mentioned it is a medical term, especially from homeopathy. Homeopathy follow the principle like cures like. And suppose you are suffering from cold, it suggests you to eat ice cream. Means I'm giving an example because it believes in like cures like. So catharsis is the emotional effect. It is the purgation. Purgation is a medical term. Means it purifies your body. Likewise, a tragedy purifies your mind, your heart. Purification of the emotions of the audience by the end of the play is the purpose of tragedy. Okay, so this is a really very interesting, what we call argument presented by Aristotle that we are going to understand. So it has influence, literary criticism concerned with the compositional element of work began with Aristotle's Poetics. We started talking about the plot, characters, etc. because of Aristotle's influence. Whatever we talk today, it is because of Aristotle's ideas. And these particular ideas set the standard with respect to which reality works, especially in drama. Means for years together, for different ages, the standard is being used, is in use for a long period of time during the Renaissance and the 18th century as well. So what is the catchphrase of this thinking, this Aristotle's philosophy? Poetry tends to express the universal. It is not the particular. This is the catchphrase that we understand. So through our discussion, we understood the thinking of both Plato and Aristotle with reference to poetry. Now, why am I saying poetry again and again? Because in those days, the term literature was not in use, not in currency. Every form of literature was referred to as poetry. Therefore, they use the term poetry.